So the Powkiddy X18S Black version, or Black Edition as I like to call it, was not well received when it released last year, and I do understand why. It was marketed to be something that it just isn't, and after doing a lot of testing, I certainly agree with those who felt wronged by the marketing. So today, I want to look at this device for what it is and to decide whether or not it is actually worth it in 2023. So introducing the Powkiddy X18S Black Edition. Let's dive right in. So, the exterior design consists of plastic for the entirety of the build. Here you have a beautiful design, in my opinion, thanks to some of the design choices here. I still like the design of the top of this device, and I still like the speaker grills that they use, and I still like the buttons layout. When opening this device, you will find your usual set of buttons, some navigation buttons for Android and the display itself. On the top, you'll find your shoulder buttons, USB-C port, mini HDMI port, and a micro SD card slot. On the bottom, you will find your stereo speakers and a headphone jack. So let's be clear on something here. These buttons have supposedly been upgraded from the previous X18S model, but that is hardly noticed here. The navigation buttons feel fine and usable, no issues there, but the D-pad and face buttons are not good. They are very shallow and feel empty inside, with very little resistance when pressing any of these buttons. The D-pad is very soft and not very satisfying to press whatsoever. I'm not a fan of these face buttons, but I do appreciate the thumbsticks, and I actually do like them. They feel nice, a little bit loose, and they finally press down for L3 and R3. I still think that they really messed up with this supposed upgrade and simply can't approve of what little they did to quantify this as an improvement. Now the shoulder buttons are an interesting case too. On my unit, L1 and R1 feel different from each other, but just ever so slightly. One has more resistance than the other, but my L2 and R2 buttons feel clicky and the same really. So my impressions on the exterior are mixed with positive aspects and negative aspects, but the negatives are more important than the positives here because they have to do with the buttons, which is what you will be gaming with, what you will be interacting with the most, so it is kind of a big deal. This device features a 5.5-inch 1280 by 720 IPS display, which is touch enabled, and it does look pretty good here. Granted, it doesn't get too bright and it's not the most colorful display out there either, but clearly it wouldn't be good enough to be used outdoors from my experiences, especially when it's bright and sunny outside. So with that said, this is still a decent screen, and it also has some fingerprint protection, which is a nice touch. But do you know what really sucks about the screen? It's actually not the display itself, but the fact that you can only set the screen in 2 positions, which has not changed at all since the original X18S. Very disappointing. Now let's get into the speakers, and these, I don't know if they have been improved, but I think that they have been. I don't remember them sounding this good, and these get really loud. A genuinely great pair of speakers, I have to say. So have a listen. This device features a T618 CPU with a Mali G52 GPU, 4GB of RAM, 64GB of internal storage, and a 5000 mAh battery. These specs are fine, but the issue to me is that it appears to be pretty much the same spec list from their original X18S, which is very disappointing. This tells me that most of the upgrades are just to the buttons, sort of, and maybe the speakers, but that's really it. When it comes to the OS, we have Android 11, and a pretty basic interface. I would not stick with this interface and would personally go straight to the Play Store to download something better to improve the navigation here, but also mostly the aesthetics. But a great thing is that it comes with the Play Store, which Ambernick doesn't always seem to understand, but this does allow you to download apps to your heart's content. So overall, they could have included a better front end, but it's nice that you can add your own regardless. I, for instance, went with the Reset Collection front end and much prefer what I get with it. Now let's get into actual emulation performance, beginning with SNES performance. So I will be using standalone emulators for all of these as I usually do. So when it comes comes to something like Chrono Trigger, obviously, this machine will crush any SNES game, and it won't be an issue. I upscaled Chrono Trigger and stretched the aspect ratio, and I think the game looks amazing like this. Now, this is a preference thing, but this is all great here. This is definitely overkill in terms of hardware for this system, but it does perform really nicely in case you were worried that for some reason this machine wouldn't be good enough for SNES. Nintendo 64 performance is also great, and it shows with Super Mario 64. Again, with a lot of the changes I made with SNES, it has been upscaled to 720p, since that's as far as it makes sense to push this device. I think it looks really good, and it runs very nicely here. So N64 is a system that is a total joy to emulate for sure, and this will also be the case for some higher systems that I can't wait to talk about, so let's actually move on to the next system. Next in line is going to be GameCube. Through the Dolphin emulator, while having Twilight Princess upscaled to 2x at 720p, this game looks pretty great and runs fairly well for the most part. At 2x, there are some stutters, hiccups, but it is surprisingly stable, so I would probably want to keep this up as is. Now, keep in mind that this will not be the case for every single game, so I would just keep most games at 1x to get pretty solid performance overall, as 2x is really pushing this system, but it's manageable, for some games at least, and that's what I like about it. So I am pretty happy with the GameCube performance here, and now that is going to be an actual upgrade. Dreamcast performance is also really good, as expected. Sonic Adventure 2 runs really well on this device, and I expect this kind of performance out of any Dreamcast game because it's not that hard to run. So yes, if you wanted a really solid machine for Dreamcast, then this will be a great option for you. Not really too much to say here, as it just gets the job done pretty well here. Next up is PlayStation 1 emulation through DuckStation, which is going to be pretty good here too. I tested out Mortal Kombat 4 and got really good results here, so I really have no complaints about the performance here. This will be the case for a lot of systems, and this generation of systems is very easy to emulate for a device like this. So we will be testing a couple of more systems to see how well this device can run them, so stay posted for those. And speaking of which, PSP through the PPSSPP emulator is handled really nicely. I tested out this GTA game and did some upscaling to pretty great results. I wanted to try something new to test out since I'd always test the exact same games, and this game was absolutely no fun to me. But with that aside, performance is pretty good, and if you wanted a PSP clamshell device, then this is probably the best option out there right now. Partly because not a lot of clamshells are being built right now, but also because this is a pretty good performer overall. But this good performer does start to fall apart when it comes to PlayStation 2 emulation. GameCube emulation seemed so good to me that I had high expectations about PlayStation 2, but this device clearly struggles to run a more mid-range PlayStation 2 game like Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, even at 1x. I did no upscaling and stuck with Vulcan since it seemed to perform better than the OpenCL. But as you can see, this game is not running very well here, and it isn't exactly playable. There were audio issues too, with stuttering and the like, so seeing as this device doesn't do a great job with PlayStation 2, I simply can't recommend it if you really wanted to play PlayStation 2 games, because quite a few that I tested had some issues, all of them having performance issues, even at 1x. When it comes to the battery life, I have to say that it isn't the best, but it is workable. I think about 3.5 hours is a pretty reasonable expectation from this device, depending on what you're playing, but I would say these numbers are reasonable. Standby power isn't great though, as it will die if you leave it for over 2 days asleep. Not the best experience. So finally, in conclusion, this device is just the X18S again, so if you already have an X18S, then you can safely ignore this device because the minor upgrades are not worth it, like, at all. But if you want a clamshell that can emulate GameCube and PSP, then this is probably the best option out there. It's a device that, in spite of all of its flaws, I still like it. Quite a bit, actually. And for pretty much permanent sale of $140, I don't think that the asking price is too high and would consider it to be pretty reasonable. So, would I recommend the X18S Black Edition? Yes, if you've been considering it, then I probably would. But if you want to play PlayStation 2 games, then forget it. GameCube is probably the limit, so I wouldn't expect much more out of it than that. Still, I like it, so I can go ahead and recommend it. And overall, is it worth it in 2023? I think that so far in early 2023, sure, but you might benefit from waiting just a little bit longer to see what else comes out down the line. 2022 was a great year for retro handhelds, but let's see what we end up seeing in 2023. So yeah, that's probably my ultimate recommendation. So thank you so much for watching this video all the way up until the very end. I do really appreciate it. And if you are going to get this device, or if you are interested in it at all, then please make sure to use my link, my affiliate link to Powkiddy down below. If you use my link, it does support the channel quite a bit. So I would appreciate that a lot, because we get to use those funds to put back into review units so that we can make more videos for you guys. And also, please make sure to follow me on Twitch. I do stream on there at least once a week, so you can find me over there. And I also have an Instagram where you can see what kind of shenanigans I'm up to every now and then. Now, with that said, this has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching, and until next time, enjoy.